local politics and to speak with me. I really appreciate it. My name is Kate Stoia, and thank you for the opportunity to introduce myself to everybody on the call and let you know who I am and why I'm running. I'm a 30-year resident of District 8. I am a lawyer, a parent, a foster parent, a small business owner, a neighborhood volunteer, and I recently returned to graduate school and got a master's degree in public policy from UC Berkeley. I'm running because I voted for the incumbent in my district 4 years ago. But in those 4 years, our district and the whole city has gotten more expensive, dirtier, and we have more empty storefronts because it's so hard to open and run a small business here. San Francisco was already the most childless city in the country. And during the pandemic, we lost record numbers of young people because it is simply so hard and expensive to make a life here. And I feel we need to change that. About me, I moved here in 1989, just after graduating from college, and I chose San Francisco because it was cheap to live here then. My first job here, which is, always shocking when I tell people that now, my first job here was with the Stop AIDS Project, where I was hired by and worked for 2 years alongside Ken Jones, who we lost during the pandemic and who was a longtime friend and mentor to me. I was drawn to work in AIDS education because I grew up with a gay father. And after he died in 1985, I stayed close, and I'm still close to his partner, who was at that time very involved with ACT UP Los Angeles and has lived with HIV for a long time and still is doing great. I moved to District 8 in 1991, and I pretty much never left, although I've lived all over District 8, in Noe, in Glen Park, in the Castro. I was a renter for many years, and I bought my first house in 1998. I went to law school at UC Berkeley after I worked at the Stop AIDS Project, and I clerked for a federal judge for a year after that. Then I practiced law litigation for the next 5 years, working as a litigator on a range of cases from employment disputes to civil rights actions. In 1999, I helped to represent a transgender woman who had been misgendered by the police and wrongfully strip searched by the San Francisco Sheriff's Department. After a federal jury trial, we won, and our client was awarded compensation and punitive damages. Actually, at the time, it was the largest award ever against the San Francisco Sheriff's Department. And certainly, we hoped at the time, although it did not turn out to be the case, was the beginning of turning the trend of misgendering transgender prisoners at the time. My son was born in 2001 and my daughter was born in 2003. In order to spend time with my kids, I turned my energy to volunteering. I wrote for the Glen Park News, I organized park cleanups, I volunteered at Glide Church in their children's program and at my kids' schools. My husband is a contractor, and he and I work together on remodeling abandoned or derelict properties and turning them into beautiful and livable spaces. I'm proud of the work we've done and the contributions that we've made in that way to the city of San Francisco as well. We have kept workers and craftspeople employed even during the pandemic, and we have expanded and updated San Francisco's housing supply. Our most recent project was the restoration of a beautiful Mission District Victorian, which had been stuccoed over, abandoned by its owners, and occupied for years by squatters. After the raw sewage was cleared out of the basement, we added a unit and eventually sold all 4 apartments to first-time homeowners, including a teacher and a city employee. But this work has also given me insight into the bureaucracy and the corruption that I feel is holding San Francisco back. City agencies seem tasked with creating as many obstacles for ordinary citizens as possible rather than supporting us. Guidelines and even building codes are enforced arbitrarily. This kind of discretion leads to corruption and influence peddling. I was shocked in the realm of development, but maybe not surprised to learn that there's a whole group of people whose job in San Francisco is permit expediter, which generally means that they know someone in the planning or building department and can grease the wheels and sometimes cut the line for their clients. This is no way to structure development in a city as dense as San Francisco and with such a huge housing need. It's no wonder that we have such an enormous housing crisis and that the FBI has arrested and charged multiple heads of San Francisco departments, as well as permit expediters and building inspectors with fraud, corruption, and lying to federal authorities. I have a long commitment to serving my community. I've served on the boards of 3 nonprofits, one, the nation's first educational farm, one, a theater group formed by 2 young gay men of color here in San Francisco. Actually, I just went to our opening event for a theater festival for them last night. And now on the Mission High School Foundation. I'm just starting work at Mission High School Foundation, but the other ones, I was part of turning around the financial fortunes of these organizations, taking them from the verge of failure to strong and successful. In 2017, my husband and I became foster parents. The experience of dealing with yet another city agency, in this case, the Human Services Agency, prompted me to literally say to myself over and over, there must be a better way to do this. And my Googling of solutions led me to UC Berkeley's Goldman School of Public Policy. I went back to school in 2021 and got a master's degree in public policy to learn how to approach and address issues like foster care and like local politics. A friend of mine put it best to me. I'm a person of action. I like to meet people from different backgrounds and cultures. I like to dig into policy issues and really understand them. And I believe strongly that the role of government is to help make people's lives better. And that is why I got into this race. I have been really disappointed with Supervisor Mandelman's tenure on the board. Although I think he and I share a lot of the same values, he has been at best an ineffective advocate, and at worst an obstruction on progress on everything from housing to homelessness to clean streets to good governance. To fix the problems in San Francisco and to make it the best we can be, we need a District 8 supervisor who can commit to making real change, not someone who pushes through policies that the San Francisco Chronicle editorial board accurately described as a cheap lie, or who votes against creating 500 units of new housing with 25% of them below market rate in the Tenderloin where the need is so great. We really need a supervisor here who's committed to actual progress and not just paying lip service to these values and hoping that the voters don't notice. I'd also like to state just really firmly that I think that District 8 has a special place, not only in San Francisco history, but also on the national and even on the world stage, due to the legacy of Harvey Milk and the important role that the Castro neighborhood in particular plays in both the real lives of its residents and also the hopes and dreams of people around the country and around the world. San Francisco has long been and has to remain a beacon of hope for so many people, trans kids seeking gender affirming care, and for anyone in the LGBTQ community. But we cannot be that when houses cost $5 million each and when our streets are mired in dysfunction and filth. And with that, I'll just close and say thank you for the opportunity to meet with you today. I look forward to discussing issues of importance to the Castro in particular, and especially to the small business owners in the Castro.
All right, thank you, Kate. That's
Thanks.
a great introduction. Kathy, I think I'd like to just let you talk to us about your experience of Kate. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for gathering this morning. Basically, I shared with Kate the issues that we have, in addition to shortage of housing and stuff like that. But it's obviously what attracted me to change is number one. I have a problem with Raphael not answering his emails, and he claims he gets too many, but the truth is his voters are trying to reach out to him, and he's totally oblivious to being responsible, acknowledging that that's his job. The other thing is that there are programs he's trying to push for more, like the street crisis response team. He claims that they're short-staffed, but when their staff arrive, they don't do anything anyway. So why expand more on these programs when they're not working? So that is my biggest peeve and my regret for voting him in, honestly. But what attracted me to Kate's background is a master's in public policy and having a law degree as well. And I shared with her the challenges we're having with the police department in the city upholding the public policy. And that's what I'd like, Kate, to, if you can elaborate on. I shared where the crime and the drug addiction and the attack on our community. And so can you elaborate what your experiences are and how you think that we could better handle this as a community?
Yeah, I would be happy to do that. And I had a really interesting and enlightening conversation with Kathy the other day. So I've already thanked her privately for that, but I'll just thank her publicly for that, for bringing these issues to my attention, and also for encouraging me to dig a little bit deeper into the studies that have been done on this. I want to say, first of all, I agree that Supervisor Mandelman has been really difficult to reach. He's been the most difficult to reach of any supervisor that I've had in District 8 in the past 30 years, the least accessible. And when I do finally hear from someone in his office, the general tenor of the response is like, wow, sorry, things sound tough. And there's very little substantive help that I've been given. And I don't reach out very often, but when I reach out, it's because I'm having a problem with a city issue. So I just want to echo that. I agree. I think that is literally the supervisor's job, is to be responsive and to help when there's a problem. With respect to what's going on in the Castro right now, what Kathy and I talked about and what I was initially focusing on when she and I spoke was on the homelessness aspect of it. And what Kathy really, I think, astutely pointed out is that there is an addiction and a lawlessness element of this, and this is the problem. And so I actually moved to San Francisco, as I mentioned, from New York in the 1980s. New York in the 1980s was not dissimilar from what we're seeing in San Francisco right now. The New York of today is much different. And as horrible as Rudy Giuliani turned out to be, he ran for many years saying, we actually need to get a handle on these broken windows. We need to get a handle on graffiti. We need to get a handle on street level crime and dysfunction. And if we do that, we're going to see a turnaround. So since I spoke to Kathy a couple of days ago, have spent a lot of time doing research into, because I know that I've seen the change in New York, and I grew up between there and Boston. I've seen the change in Boston, and I now went back and tried to go through the academic research on, was that really as a result of this broken windows theory of policing, or it's also true that there has been a national the crime rate nationally has decreased since the 1970s. It's been on a steady decrease. So I was wondering, is this a correlation or is it a causation? And the papers that I found, actually, I found a really great 2015 meta-analysis, which is when they look at a bunch of different analyses and bring all of the results together. And what that finds is that if you employ this more aggressive form of this broken windows policing, you are going to find a decrease in crime overall that's lasting. Now, the best results are found when you have an active and engaged community groups, which we definitely have in the Castro. And I think of personal interest is the fact that I have an in-law apartment below my house, and the woman who lives there is out of the country right now. She asked me to watch her car. Her car is a Prius, and the catalytic converter got stolen about a week ago, of course, as happening all over the place. I made a police report because she's been able to file the police report online. I called the police. They came out this morning, and I asked them, how does it feel? I said, I'm having this meeting a little later this morning. What does it feel like to be a police officer right now in San Francisco? What do you feel that you're able to do your jobs? And both of them said, it is very frustrating because we get this policy pushback and we get told, no, you cannot enforce sit-lie. And what they're feeling is look, here I am, I'm a police officer. My tool is to enforce the criminal law. What I want to do, most police officers got into the job of policing to help, right? This is their way of helping. And they say, what we want to do is we want to get these people into an inflection point, and that has to be through the criminal justice system. Right now we don't have the resources, and we can't. There's no other way to compel people to move off the streets and into some sort of, like I said, inflection point. Are they always going to go into treatment? Not necessarily. But and I think the tension, as everybody on this call knows, is that, and the police officers that I spoke to this morning were saying the same thing. No one wants to kick someone when they're down. Nobody wants to do that. Police officers don't want to do it. Merchants don't want to do it. No one does. But we cannot live with this level of, we really shouldn't be living with any level of street dysfunction and crime. And I think the evidence backs up the fact that a more aggressive approach towards maintaining order, especially in the commercial corridors, is actually going to yield better results for everyone, because it's going to yield a long-term crime reduction, and it's going to part of what's happening right now, you guys are all seeing it in the Castro, is there is just a general hopelessness in this city about the way forward. 65% of people polled say that they have considered leaving the city. I'm among them. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I have definitely said to my husband, maybe it's not the place for us. It's so expensive. You are guaranteed to be the victim of a crime. There are many places in the city now that as a small woman, I cannot walk. And that includes the civic center, that includes going to the main library. Not to mention, when my kids were younger and we lived in the Castro, one of the things that we had to talk about was how to avoid meth addicts. What do you do if there's someone on the street who's acting really out of control? I mean, I know my kids are urban kids and they made it through okay, and it's okay to be street smart. But I have also done death penalty appeals work, and I will tell you that every single person on death row was very, very high when they committed their crime that they are now sitting on death row for. So I think it may not be long before, and we have already seen the attacks on the EMT drivers down at the 24th Street BART. I'm worried about the potential for like a ratcheting up of violent incidents, and I think that we need to get a handle on it before that happens. I mean, we're very far gone as it is, and it's very, very frustrating as it is. And I just want to also echo what Kathy was saying or just like highlight it. City government's job is to make people's lives better. And our city government is really failing at that right now. It's really failing at it. We are creating a city for tech CEOs and people in abject poverty and misery, and nobody in between. So I've been focusing in my campaign a lot on housing because our current supervisor blocks housing at every opportunity, and I think that's driving our housing costs up. But I really thank Kathy for bringing this other issue to my attention, because I think it really deserves, it deserves a more thoughtful and thorough response than it's gotten.
So I got a question for you. Thank you for taking the time with us.
Yeah.
I've talked to Supervisor Mondelman about the issue of these issues specifically, and the one thing he gives me a pushback on, I'd like to hear your opinion on how you're going to deal with it, is he says it's the other supervisors, the ones that are taking the softer approach on people that, how many chances do you have to give them? He pushes back. He says they have such a strong voice. Well, how are you going to effectively against those voices? I mean, I'm going to side on the side of business and residences. We're there, we live there. There's 10,000 people on our streets. There's only so many blocks in a street. That's why they're everywhere. I have friends complaining they're actually now all the way up into Diamond Heights, into the parks up there. So, and they lived up the hill. It's never happened that. So, and you know why. So how are you going to deal with the others that are pushing back? And I understand these people need a break, but what's your approach on it?
Yeah, so I agree. I'm going to say a couple things. First of all, to my knowledge, Supervisor Mandelman has never held a job in the private sector. He has always been a city government employee in the city attorney's office, and now in our government. I think you have a really different perspective on what it means, what this kind of dysfunction means when your paycheck does not hinge on the resolution of it. So I'll just put that out first of all. I think being a small business person trying to make a living at something that absolutely depends on city government doing its job and keeping the streets clean and keeping them dysfunction and crime free, it has a special meaning in residence when that is your rent payment that you cannot make if you have to close your business down or if you can't operate. So that's the first thing. Second thing, I feel, Supervisor Mandelman has said in every debate that we've had, and we've had 4 now, and 2 of them that were filmed are up on my website, so you can go see them. The most recent one was the SF Standard one, and I thought that they would video it themselves, and they didn't end up doing it. But 2 you can definitely see. He has said in every single debate that he views his role as like finding this middle path. And I guess I find that frustrating. I wanted him to come out as a stronger and firmer advocate for the neighborhoods that he represents. I remember when San Francisco had at-large elections. In some ways, I could argue that that we should go back to that system, because then all the supervisors would have to take the entire city into account. But the fact is, we don't have that system right now. We have a system of local district representation, and I think it is interesting and illuminating that the news coverage of the absolute breakdown in dysfunction and city government is coming out of District 8 more often than not. You know, you have the Castro merchants threatening to withhold taxes, which is reasonable given the level of service that they're getting. You have this thing that happened over in Glen Park with the shutdown of Canyon Market after 2 years of the market owner, you know, begging the city and Supervisor Mandelman's office for help. So, you know, Supervisor Mandelman was looped into that starting in 2020. And the brunt of that was borne by Canyon Market in the end, you know, and she's been really publicly saying we're losing $100,000 because of this one crazy person, and nobody can get a handle on that. So I would have preferred, and I was hoping from Supervisor Mandelman that he would be a stronger, more vocal advocate on the board. I think he is preserving his options for a run for his next office, and I don't think that serves me particularly well as a District 8 resident. And you know, this is my first political race. I'm not the politician that has done what Mandelman did, which is little by little climb your way up on the rungs of all the different advocacy groups and then city college board. And I guess I would say to you that I think a lot of the reason that we are finding this enormous groundswell of opposition to what the board is doing is that we have created this system with this kind of activism advocacy system that we've set up now, you know, kind of inadvertently in San Francisco, of politicians who are looking at the next office and are not looking at the current one. And I would do that differently. And this is why I always, you know, open to groups. Like, I have lived in this district for 30 years and tried to make a living here, raised kids here, become a foster parent here, being involved in my community and run a small business and, you know, made payroll and employed people. And I think that experience is really, really different from pulling in a government paycheck and then coming in and just saying like, hey, my experience in debating Supervisor Mandelman is he thinks he's the smartest person in the room and he doesn't think he's doing anything wrong. And, you know, to have a 12% approval rating and, you know, look your constituents in the eye and say, it's not me, it's them. To me, that is a huge problem. I don't think he's an ineffective advocate or my personal opinion is has his eye on higher office. And he hopes that if he swims enough below the radar and if he can blame it enough on other people on the board, that, you know, we will forgive him and forget, and his name will just be familiar in the next race. You know, that's like kind of basic poli-sci class. But that's, you know, truly what I think is happening. And honestly, like, that answer is less as a candidate and more as just a really frustrated resident of this district.
Yes, but it's your position from that. I mean, he was not like any of what he has built in any of his literature. You know, where's the advocacy? And I like, and yes, I hear the fire, because we definitely need some fire. It's been a long, well, my brother has gone through a 6-year health issue, and we've talked about the challenges that living in the Castro can be, and it reflects upon his visit that he came to San Francisco. And as we've talked about it, my family, none of them have a desire to come out and visit, which is okay. It's a good thing. But it's speaking to more of what's happening with the city, and that's disappointing. So I don't want to take any more of your time, but I'm sure there's some good questions out there. But thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no, but I agree, and I appreciate the question, and I appreciate the sentiment. And I think that, you know, I think that Supervisor Mandelman came to my door. You know, like he probably came to a lot of our doors 4 years ago and said, no. I mean, I think he watched what Scott Wiener had done to get elected. He had run against him once before.
Yes.
And, you know, I think he just kind of put the playbook into action. But I felt you could love or hate Scott Wiener. You know where you stand with him. You 100% know where you stand. He takes a stand. He generally has arguments to back it up, and he goes hard for what he believes in, and he's a really strong advocate for what he believes in. I cannot say the same about Raphael Mandelman. I'm looking for somebody who is strongly and effectively, even if we have obstructive other members of the board, say something. When the city is thinking about spending $550,000 of our tax money to prototype new garbage cans and seek input from people who do not care what the garbage can looks like and simply would like some garbage off their streets, raise your hand, say something. And it was the same with when Aaron Peskin that was an open secret, if it was even a secret at City Hall, that Aaron Peskin was a non-functioning alcoholic for years and years and was absolutely berating these staff people who were coming in front of the board to speak. Raise your hand and say something. I feel really strongly that this is not a time in American politics and in America in general where we can just watch people act badly and just quietly go about our business. And I feel frankly, like I said in my introduction, District 8 is too important as well for that to be the stance of any politician that represents this district.
Appreciate your perspective on that part of it. That's a depth that has not shown up anywhere in years. So thank you for that part.
Thanks.
Fred, do you have some questions?
I have a question. Are there districts that you think might be more dysfunctional than 8 and would be better served by getting, someone fresh in the position?
I think what I've seen I think District 10 is pretty dysfunctional, and unfortunately, and I think a lot of San Francisco's, I think there's a lot that could be happening in District 10. And unfortunately, it seems like that race isn't super competitive. So to me, that's a shame. And then in the other races that are currently happening in 4 and 6, the thing that I'm happy to see is that housing has risen to the top of a lot of the discussions. So I think the other districts are seeing, 6 has a pretty severe problem with street level dysfunction. And you definitely hear that discussed in the debates. And I like the turn towards understanding that we have a really severe housing crisis here, and that I haven't seen that discussed as openly as I have in this cycle. So I'm seeing that across the board in all of the supervisor races.
I guess I meant, why not run in a district where things are worse is what I meant.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I live here. You're stuck with where you live. I live here, and I've only lived, honestly, in District 8, unless the boundaries significantly changed. Like I said, I moved here in '89, and I rented a place on Church and 22nd, and then I bought in Glen Park. Then I moved to the Castro. And now I'm back in Noe Valley. I've lived in this district for the past 30 years. Weirdly, I'm not even really thinking about the boundaries of District 8, but the fact is, I do not move very far every time I move.
Do you have to run in the district you live in? I don't know how all that works.
Yes, you do have to run in the district you live in.
All right, I get it. I get it.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't know you didn't know that. Yeah, so I don't know if there was a bit of a scandal with the District 4 race, because one of the people who was running in District 4, which is the Sunset, was actually registered to vote and did vote in the Bayview. So she ended up actually getting removed from the ballot. So yeah, I think you have to be in a district for 30 days. But I would say too that I know that there are, I'm adjacent to the mission, which is also pretty dysfunctional. I don't know the mission, as well as I know District 8. And so to the degree that like we were saying, if we went back to at-large elections, I wouldn't be opposed to that. But to the degree that these residency requirements do necessitate that the person like actually lives in and is involved in that community, I mean, I kind of like that. My kids I lived in the Castro for, I think, about 8 years, and my kids were probably 6 and 8 when I moved there, so it's like very formative years for them. And I have so many, and they have some. I mean, my daughter, I guess she must have been a little younger than that, because the first word she ever read was Castro on the big movie theater sign, and I think that there's something to that, like really deep involvement with a particular neighborhood and district that is meaningful.
Yeah. Kate, here's a question. Actually, two questions. I'm a tenant in San Francisco, a renter, and I'm just wondering, why should I vote for you?
Well, one of the most emotionally difficult things to deal with on the campaign, as I've been campaigning, are people that come up to me and say, I'm in a rent controlled apartment and I am panicked. I'm absolutely panicked that my building will get Ellis acted, or the owners will move in, I'll lose my rent controlled apartment, and I will not be able to move in the city. I will not have another option because it is so expensive here. That will mean I will have to leave the city. And that is real. I mean, we have created this weird Monaco-like existence here where everything is so, so, so expensive. Supervisor Mandelman, during his last 4 years, has voted against housing at every turn. And I believe that if we create more housing and more density of housing, that we are going to loosen the market and return us into a better kind of equilibrium, the one that we were in when I arrived here in 1989. And you could really find an apartment pretty much anywhere. And if you needed to move or wanted to move, you could very easily make a lateral move. It wasn't that if you lost your one place that you were locked into, you were absolutely screwed and you couldn't find anything else. And so I have been a big proponent of trying to like truly streamline new building construction and densification. And I think what we're seeing from Supervisor Mandelman is a lot of lip service around that, but behind the scenes, he is blocking housing at an extraordinary rate. Only 495 new units have been added to District 8 during the 4 years that he's been on the board. And those 495 units, by the way, are, equal to the units at 469 Stevenson that he blocked, going in downtown over a political fight. So he is definitely paying lip service to housing creation. If you want me to kind of get into why his fourplex legislation is problematic, I'll do that. But he does a lot of things like this fourplex legislation that sound good. It sounds good to want to densify. The fact of the matter is that he always makes sure, and he has long been a proponent of leaving local control in these measures. So his fourplex legislation was expressly designed to defeat and knock out and render impotent the state law, which already allowed for that amount of density. So the state law is SB 9. The state law says if you densify to that degree, your neighbors can't block you. And then Supervisor Mandelman had his fourplex legislation that left in discretionary review, local control, so that your neighbors can block you. And everybody in this district who is in any way development adjacent knows like that is what he does. He empowers NIMBYs to block new housing all the time. We are the third from the bottom in the creation of new housing units of all the districts in the city. So only the Sunset and the Richmond are below us, and we're almost on par with them, even though we have this immense need, in this district for new housing. So, I think rental housing and housing for people who own, they're linked. And I think the absolute panic that renters feel in terms of like, if I lose this space, there's no place else for me to turn. I've lived in a San Francisco where that wasn't the case. We have had over the past 30 years, I've heard a statistic from the Housing Action Coalition of between 10 and 12 jobs created for every unit of housing created. So you can see we are just absolutely squeezed with housing because this tech money spigot is not going to turn off anytime soon. I mean, Apple Computer is not going to relocate. Facebook is not going to relocate. They pay enormous salaries and people want to live in the nearby city, right? So that is going to squeeze people out. We need to create new housing opportunities for renters and for owners.
Why would he or any of the other supervisors be against housing? Maybe it's an obvious question. I don't know.
I mean, I think it's because, well, I mean, so here's the thing. I will tell you that I have posted on my website a blog post, which I found about 6 months ago, by Scott Wiener, that was written in 2017 about Supervisor Mandelman when Mandelman was running against Jeff Sheehy for this role. So Scott Wiener had moved up to the Senate, and then you'll recall that the mayor at the time appointed Jeff Sheehy, and then Mandelman ran against Sheehy. So Scott Wiener, because of the statements that Raphael Mandelman was making on the campaign trail, Scott Wiener felt compelled to write down in a blog post that his politics and Scott Wiener's were absolutely diametrically opposed, because apparently Mandelman was going around saying like, well, if you like Scott Wiener, like, I'm your man, I'm the next obvious choice to step into this. And one of the two main things that are talked about in that blog post, and I can actually put it in the chat, I just need to find it in my documents. The two main things that he talked about were housing policy and Mandelman's attitude towards the Coalition on Homelessness. So on housing policy, Scott Wiener said, I have never, ever seen Mandelman advocate for good housing policy. Good housing policy has to be policy which allows a city to flex and expand its housing stock in order to meet the needs of the residents. And what Supervisor Mandelman has always advocated for, and what he does quietly now and not so publicly because he knows that it is falling out of favor, is he empowers NIMBYs to block housing near them, right? Everybody wants housing. Everybody wants new housing, but they don't want it to go in right next door to them. And I think as long as we let certain property owners have an outsized say in something that's for the common good, which is more housing for a community or for a neighborhood, I think we're going to end up in the bottleneck that we're in right now. So it doesn't actually make that much sense, but it is true that is the position that he's taken. Why is he doing it? I think that there are a lot of property owners that probably support him in that. And maybe that's a political, basis for the next run. I'll tell you that he's always done it. This is absolutely his record. On homelessness, his record is also not good. He's been a big supporter and champion of the Coalition on Homelessness, which basically takes the position that people should be able to live on the streets if they want.
I have a question about housing as well, but it relates to housing for the homeless. And it seems like the Homeless Coalition and the progressives have promoted the idea that what we need to do is build permanent supportive housing for all of these people. And my question is that feasible? Can we afford to do that? It seems like the cost of permanent supportive housing is, really prohibitive, and you need housing to house these people that have mental illness and drug problems, those things are not necessarily going to change once they move into permanent supportive housing. The cost of building this kind of housing and caring for these people as a city, I wonder if it's doable. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And what I have done is I have looked at cities in the US that are getting a better handle on their problems of homelessness. And so I can point you to two, and again, I can put these kind of citations for you guys into the chat, or I can just email the group separately. That might be easier. So Houston, Texas has moved 25,000 people off of the streets and into housing. An enormous part of the reason that they have been able to do that, and that, by the way, that result has held. They've reduced their homelessness population by 63%, and it's held for the past 2 years. So they're really getting a handle on their homelessness problem. They build housing. So part of what happened is what we were talking about, the rental issue. Part of what happens here is that I just want to split, and this kind of goes back to what Kathy had brought to me originally, and kind of the way that she started me thinking about these problems. There are distinct populations in our homelessness population, right? There are some people, many people, who miss a mortgage payment, miss a rent payment, have a medical issue. We live in a very unforgiving country around these issues, and they fall off the edge. And now maybe they're couch surfing, maybe they're, at a certain point, their friends and neighbors get tired of them. Now maybe they're like in a tent on the street. Okay, those people can be helped. They're not in active full-blown addiction yet. They're not presenting with this, and they need a helping hand for a little while. They don't need permanent supportive housing. In other words, what they need is rental housing that's affordable. They may need 6 months of help to pay for that, but at some point they're going to be able to pick up the pieces of their lives and move forward. And I think actually the majority of the problem around like poverty and homelessness is in that category. If people are going to be like, I can do okay, I may need a helping hand from time to time, but I'm basically going to be all right. That's
I will, Bartlett, and in today.
Sorry, your thing's not muted. That's okay. I thought you were interjecting. Okay, so that's one issue, and that is addressed through building enough housing to meet our needs here. Then there is a smaller group of people, much smaller, who are going to have really, really intractable, really difficult problems. We're seeing, a lot of people in really active addiction in the Castro right now, for example. And then a lot of times that's going to be a dual diagnosis situation, active addiction, active flaring up of serious mental health issues. Those people, they are getting an outsized amount of our attention here in San Francisco right now because their problems are so severe, and we've kind of tied hamstrung ourselves in how to deal with them. Boston, Massachusetts has every night on its streets, it has about 3% of its unhoused population sleeping outside. And by contrast, San Francisco has about 56% of our unhoused population sleeping outside on any particular evening. Boston has a smaller homelessness population. They have a population of about between 4,000 and 5,000, and the estimates that we've read from the last point in time count are between 8,000 and 9,000. So it's a little bit smaller, but Boston's budget is $100 million a year. San Francisco's is $500 million a year. So the other thing that's happening here is that we have outsourced the solutions to these problems to this web of nonprofits. There are no demonstrable metrics, no trackable metrics for whether anybody is solving these problems. And going back to my point about Supervisor Mandelman not ever having held a job in the private sector, I somewhat suspect that there are maybe more than one person on the current board of supervisors who's not super well versed in reading balance sheets and understanding financial inflow and outflow because we have these 2 rehab programs downtown that asked the Board of Supervisors for a $1.2 million bailout, just cash bailout last month, and now have announced in the past couple days that they're going belly up anyway. They're not sustainable financially. So the board has been like floating these nonprofits through these financial troubles. And ultimately they're going to fail and close. Having worked in the nonprofit sector quite a bit during my career, I know that the relationship to money and finances can be difficult. You know, you often find people who go into nonprofit work because they're great people and they really want to help and they really want to make a difference. And there's often, very often, a lack of financial acuity and savvy. Like, just frankly, you know, this is why a lot of nonprofits go under. You have to understand a balance sheet. You have to understand how much is coming in and how much is going out. And then I would say the other thing is we just don't have metrics that are well tracked. I don't know if you guys, as I did during the beginning of the pandemic, really tuned in every day to the case counts and the hospitalizations. And the city did a great job of making those numbers very, very clear for us. The city could do the same thing with the homelessness population. You know, they could track that more readily. They could make that information more available to us. As it is, we do have these hundreds of millions of dollars going out to these nonprofits that, you know, I would argue they're definitely not getting a handle on the, you know, the problem is not solved for all the money we're throwing at it. And so I think it's a very long-winded way of saying, I think the answer is twofold. One is we absolutely have to increase housing production across the city and density across the city so that we can get rental prices down and we don't have people falling off the edge of, you know, kind of society into living on the streets. And I think once we are actually more effectively meeting our needs to house the people that are here, I think we are then going to be left with a smaller, very much smaller group of people who are who may need, you know, more intense help. And I know things like conservatorships and locked psychiatric facilities and, you know, all of these are like kind of a web of policy solutions that have to come around this issue. But the most important issue in my mind, other than what Kathy's talking about, which is like, we need calm streets that are not crime ridden at all times. We also need the production of housing. We need more housing in this city. It's too hard to build. It's too uncertain. You know, the old car wash on Divisadero and Fell or Oak, what street that is, the developer just pulled out of that deal, and that was going to be a 200 unit building there. That's in District 5. Dean Preston is the supervisor there. He's really, really anti-development. Every development, you know, is vilified by him. And this is the result. You know, development is also a business. People make money at it. It has to pencil out. And if you're trying to develop a large building like that, which is going to be a great thing in terms of getting people housed, developer has to make money. If there's this much uncertainty and this much thought that this supervisor is going to scuttle this at the last minute, you know, banks are under those circumstances don't lend for those projects. And, you know, this is the result we see.
Kate, I have a follow-up question to about being a renter. Follow-up question is, I'm a landlord. Why should I vote for you?
Well, in some ways, it's a good question. I mean, in some ways, I am arguing against my own self-interest in my campaigning because I am a property owner, and I would like the value of my property to go down. My house is worth too much money at this point. My kids cannot afford to live here. I think that so landlords and property owners have one set of values, which is the value of their property, like the actual financial value of their property. And that's important. It is definitely important. But there's a second, and I would actually argue more important value. And this is why I believe that we need to create more housing, even though hopefully it will make the value of my own personal property go down. We are living in what is kind of approaching a failed city, you know, and we have created a city that is only accessible to the very, very wealthy or the very, very, very poor. And we don't have a middle strata in this city, and it's not workable. You know, you guys who own your own businesses and are trying to make business work know that it's the conditions on the street are terrible. And then we have, you know, it is very possible to live in the city as a tech CEO or as like a high up tech worker and avoid the conditions in the street, you know, just to like get into your car in your garage, drive to your location and not. So I think what we really want to create is a city that is livable and workable for people at all income levels. I think, you know, I want to live near the teachers in my kids' school and the firefighters who work at the local fire station and the, you know, nail technician. I bought the house that I currently live in from someone who worked as a nail technician on 24th Street. You know, this house would be not just out of reach, but like out of reach by a magnitude of, you know, 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times to someone in that income bracket now. And I think that's a shame. I think cities work best when when we're all mixed in together and getting along with each other. It's why people are drawn to city life, the density and the variety and the diversity. And I think we're creating an unworkable, unlivable city. As a landlord, I don't want to live in a city where 65% of people are considering leaving. You know, that's not a healthy city, and it's not something that's going to keep my investment worth something over the long run.
But isn't expense just sort of the nature of a big world-class city? I mean, you know, I went to college in New York City. I lived there during that time period, and you know, it was expensive. It was the same sort of thing. All the finance guys and lawyers and doctors could afford to live there. But you know, as a student and then starting my career, you know, I had roommates. There were, you know, four of us living in a two-bedroom apartment. Um, you know, you share, you split up spaces, you work it out, and that's just the nature of these places. You know, I can't understand how you can get a world-class city like San Francisco or New York or probably Boston or LA. I don't know much about them, but how you can get it, you know, a great city where, you know, people that don't make a lot of money can afford to live. You know, when I worked in the city and I couldn't afford to live there, so I commuted, you know, an hour each way. And a lot of people did that.
Yeah, I think that we have not even begun to tap what we could to make San Francisco is consistently the most expensive city. We are
With
always
New York, it's
yeah,
pretty tied with New York.
we're going to always have very wealthy people here. And I'm not against that. Like, I just am saying that we have artificially restricted the supply of housing in this city. And we have, you have only to look at the FBI arrests and now convictions of people in the building and planning department to understand that the corruption and the pay to play there is immense, not to mention the fact that San Francisco has the longest time in city bureaucracy for creating new housing of any place in the country. I mean, it takes 4 years on average to get a project through to where you can begin work on it here. And so I think that and then we have enormous parts of the city that are completely underdeveloped. Like I was talking about District 10. I mean, I think in a city with the density that we would like to have, with the proximity to Silicon Valley that we do have, and with the enormous housing price crisis that we have, to not develop a warehouse district where warehouse owners want to sell and create development in the Bayview, but are often blocked by the supervisor because he says that that's going to create gentrification and displacement. I mean, there are ways to do both, to both develop and preserve, neighborhood character. And then if you look at areas of the city like the Sunset, which is almost all single family homes, I mean, we are not anywhere near where we could be in terms of building and density. So yes, I think it may always be more expensive here than Idaho, yes, but I think we can build a much more livable, workable city for the people that are here now.
I know this may be a longer answer, but here's my question. Interaction with the city, I had some with the health department. It took them over 10 days to respond to me.
Yeah.
I'm always told that we're short-staffed. I have a friend that's been applying to the city now for jobs for 2 years.
Yep.
And it drags on, and he never hears anything back. So what are you gonna, so what is it? Do you have people? Can you hire? Is there money? There seems to be a lot of money flowing in. What's your take on this?
My take is there is a lot of money flowing in. And this is another thing that I would love to see. I mean, I am always surprised at, given our proximity to Silicon Valley and given the role that many big tech companies would like to play in helping cities like San Francisco do things better, like in a more tech-oriented way, the old-fashioned processes that we use. My interaction is mostly with the building and planning departments, but the interfaces, the user interfaces are just insanely old-fashioned, to the degree that sometimes in the building department, you literally carry one piece of paper from one desk over to another desk, and that's part of the process. And then, by the way, like, the two desks are looking at each other across a 20-foot span. So yes, hiring here takes years and is insanely bureaucratic, and it moves insanely slowly, and yet somehow we're told all the time there's a shortage. I mean, it also makes absolutely no sense to me. I think it makes no sense to anybody that looks at it. I think there's a lot of room for change and improvement. And I think that, San Francisco, it's funny because we have such progressive liberal values, but as probably everybody on this call has experienced, there's a lot of ways in which the city's quite conservative and resistant to change and resistant to newness. There is a lot that we could be doing to make that better, including like simply making it more transparent. Again, I do think that there's also something around, spending your time working for a government, spending your entire career working for a government entity versus having to kind of hustle a little bit more in the private sector, sets up situations where, you frankly just do not care if those roles get filled, because your paycheck comes in just the same if they don't. I know that when I clerked for a federal judge, the law clerks basically more or less do the work. They do all the research and they draft the opinions for the judge and they calendar the hearings and stuff. And I know that we were all a little bit drunk with power, because we would call up these, absolute top partners at the biggest law firms and tell them that we needed to reschedule the hearing. It didn't, as a clerk, I think I was probably 25 at the time. I mean, I was doing what the judge told me to do, but it did not matter to me at all when these hearings were held, if they were held today or a week or 2 weeks from now. I now realize, with the benefit of more time in the private sector and trying to make my own money and support myself, like, no, timeliness really matters. It's going to matter to somebody. And there was a client in those interactions that really cared, but you're really insulated from that, honestly, when you're only a government employee. And so, yeah, this is another area that, just as we were discussing before, I think we need a lot of, I think we need advocacy, and I think we need loud voices saying, like, this is not working. If you're telling us we're understaffed, then staff. And I will say also, after the first candidate forum that I did, I was contacted by a woman, we talked about mental health issues and conservatorships and stuff. I was contacted by a woman who is a Harvard educated psychiatrist here in San Francisco. And she said, hey, if you want some more help and some more insight on like what's happening with mental health treatment in San Francisco, I would love to advise you. So I connected with her, and she said that when she was working at SF General Hospital, for example, you know, we always hear there's not enough beds, there's not enough beds. She said there was a wing of beds that was going unused, and all of the residents there were like, what is happening here? Again, it's a staffing issue that, you know, if it's a staffing issue, if it's a money issue, money should not ever be the problem in a city like this. And especially we have a really active philanthropy contingent. We have a lot of tax revenue coming in. I mean, it is, I think there's a level of dysfunction happening across all of these different things that nobody is really ringing the bell of alarm about. And we as residents are bearing the brunt of. So yes, I agree that is a huge problem. And it's one that goes kind of under the radar. Because when you apply for a job like that, you're kind of wondering, like, is it me? Was I just not a good candidate? No, it's just dysfunction. Just nobody's looking at it, and they don't really care because their job's not on the line and their income's not on the line if they don't get that hire done.
Kate, I want to acknowledge that it's past 10 o'clock.
Oh, okay.
If people want to go on, I'm certainly good with it. I wonder what your schedule is and what others would like to do.
Yeah, I probably do actually have to get off. I thank you for rescheduling for 9 because I had originally told Kathy 10, but I realized, you know, I got one of those automated, like, remember, you have a doctor's appointment. I have a doctor's appointment at 11 that I had forgotten about. So luckily, yes, it's a little automated thing reminded me. So yeah, I probably do have to get off in a minute, but I'm happy to reconvene. I'm also really happy to meet in person. I'm out driving around in a little electric golf cart. If you see me, if you see anybody in a golf cart, and I'll tell you, there's actually a reason for it. And the reason is that they do this in Miami. They have a fleet of electric golf cart free taxis that circulate their commercial district and get people to and from so that they can access the commercial district without a car. And in my neighborhood, I live now on 23rd and Noe, but when I lived in the Castro, I used to live on Ord, which is a beautiful street, which I loved, but is a hike up the hill. Right, exactly. So I would go shopping in the Castro, and then I would trudge, you know, sweatily up my hill. My little golf cart can make it around up every single hill. I've tried to make it up in San Francisco. It can carry multiple people and groceries. And it's one of the ways that I would love to see San Francisco innovate a little bit more. We could have a municipally funded fleet or a public-private partnership that could put a fleet of these driving around to like help people come to the Castro, come to 24th Street in Noe Valley or the commercial district in Glen Park or Cole Street without all the cars. Most trips within a city are under 3 miles. And our public transportation system here is so poor. For the people who came from New York, you'll be especially cognizant of that. But it's so poor that, you know, truthfully, many people kind of get backed into using a car way more than they would like. And this golf cart is electric, it is virtually silent, and it gets you anywhere. Kathy saw it the other day because I drove it over to see her. Gets you anywhere you need to go. Yeah. Yeah, so that's me. Flag me down.
Thank you, Kate.
Yeah.
I guess I have two questions, and if you have to go, and you know, we can follow up at some other point. But one is, so of all the cities in the country, San Francisco, I guess it was last year, had the largest decline in income of any. I think largely attributable to, you know, all the techies and, you know, people that could leave, you know, left. So, you know, what's happening, of course, is you've got people who are making money, paying a lot in taxes, leaving, business, you know, districts collapsing. And so I'm just a little concerned that, you know, people are saying, well, you know, I'd like to see the value of property decline when, you know, so are we moving to the point where, you know, no one, you know, we don't want people that are wealthy and successful living in the city, and we start catering to people that are homeless, and, providing shelter first. And so we build 8,000 condos for all the homeless, and we get another 8,000 people that come in that want their free condos. And, so we turn into a city that's, just filled with people who aren't really contributing anything, but living off the resources of whatever's left from a prior era.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. What I have seen my oldest kid is 21. And I will tell you that, as I said in my introduction, we have been the most childless city in the country for decades. Most people leave to raise families. And at this point, and during the pandemic, I think many, many people are leaving because life here is too difficult. It is just simply too difficult. City government is not meeting our needs. I think we are always going to be a desirable destination for a wide range of people, and that includes very wealthy people. And I think there is a place for really wealthy people to be here. I think there's also a place for teachers to live here. And right now we're just not creating a livable, workable city for anybody. And I'll just give you a couple of examples. So I've met recently with two small business owners. One is of a little clothing boutique, which is here in Noe Valley, called Two Birds. The owner of that is so frustrated with the city tearing up the street in front of her business. She's like, I beg them constantly to coordinate with me, because yes, tear it up, but do it at like a slow business time, or do it at a time that, let's work together on this so that you're not always fighting me. She said to me, she has kept her business open here, just barely. But she personally moved to San Rafael. So she's like, I would have loved to have stayed here, but I can't afford to have a house here and raise a kid. So that's one person. And then the other person I spoke to the other day was Terry at Cliff's Variety. And she was like, listen, I'm still in my starter condo. I thought, this is the apartment I bought. And I was like, this is my first step. And I finally am able to afford this little place, and I'm going to move up. She's like, I have not been able to. I think that rich people I have some very, very wealthy friends. I'll tell you what, they live here. Their life is fine.
Yeah,
And
I understand. I understand
yeah,
that, but like again, there were four of us living in a two-bedroom apartment in New York City in school. I have lived with or shared with someone, like the first time I lived alone and had my own place was I was, 57 years old, and I moved out here. So I don't know. I'm not particularly sympathetic to someone who's like living in their starter condo. I shared until I was 57. Now, now I can finally afford my own place. But, I think it's just a fact of life that there are places, not everyone can live in San Francisco. It's just kind of the way it is. I think there should be systems where, some people can live in a place that's expensive that are like essential type workers, doctors, school teachers, fire people, police people, and there's some amount of those that can do that. But not every school teacher is going to be able to live in San Francisco.
yeah. I mean,
I
I
mean,
think
I guess he's a brother-in-law, was a policeman. He's sharing a house with three other people, and he actually likes it. That's what he wants to do. He can afford his own place. I mean, cops make.
And we are too. Stream Eyewitness News live or watch the latest First Alert forecast anytime.
So convenient, so much control.
Just grab your remote and search ABC 11 in your
So
TV's
that's the
app store
alignment.
from ABC
Let's
11
talk
Eyewitness
about
News.
snapping. I showed you a little bit of snapping, and what's really good about Premiere Pro is they borrowed the snapping from After Effects. So let me duplicate this guy here. Let's see here. So with that snap graphics turned on, if I click on the upper left
Sorry, I was
area,
already
if I go
talking and I
too
was
far, I'm
muted.
going to resize this. That's
Sorry.
not what
Hi
I
everyone, how are you?
click
So,
near the edge, and you'll see
before I
that
show
point
you this
turns
spot, I
red.
wanted to give you like a
That's
little
the
bit of
snapping
background of
point.
what we
I'm
did.
snapping
So
along that
we are
line,
preparing a new marketing
or I'm
campaign for
snapping
KBC,
right on that
but before
corner,
we produce the
or I can
actual
snap
spots,
it to the
we
center,
wanted to test the
or I can
concepts
snap it
first.
onto
So
the side.
we produced and tested 7 different promos to try to understand what better resonated with our audience. We tested different versions, including an historical concept, a breaking news one, some good feeling spots, some very locally driven spots, and then these 24/7 streaming spots. So what we found was that the most successful ones were the breaking news one, which is kind of obvious because ABC is very well known for that in our market, and this 24/7 one. And by successful, I mean that it drove multiple dimensions and not only the streaming promise. So these spots were made for testing, so they were kind of rough. But we were focusing more on the message and not so much the imagery or camera moves or talent shots. So we're producing this spot in a better way later. But let's play Mark.
Here's the thing about Southern California. News breaks here all day long. Check this out. ABC 7, 24/7.
We're the only LA station that streams local news 24/7.
ABC 7, 24/7 lets us go beyond local. We go hyper-local. Air 7 on top of a wildfire. Wherever you watch, just search ABC 7 Los Angeles. Stream it on your TV, on your phone, wherever it works for you. That's why ABC 7 is Southern California's news leader. It's on right now.
So pretty good looking spot, but we're still putting a lot more effort on that. So in these graphs, you can see the before and after perceived impression of KBC. The lighter color, the lighter blue, reflects what people thought before watching the spot, and then the darker line is for what they thought after watching the spot. So you can clearly see how the spot influenced this impression. The biggest difference was obviously for streaming local news 24/7, that is highlighted there, which was the main message for the spot. But look at all the others also grew. Like you can see like the first two, so makes every local news program available in all the places you want to get your news. Big difference there, 17% before and after watching the spot, and makes getting the local news more convenient. Also a big gap there of growth. Then can we go to the next slide, Mark? Also, it's for action taken. This is for actions taken after watching the spot. So we can see that 50% of the people are more likely to download our app and start streaming after watching the spot. And also, I think this spot could work as a commercial for Roku or Amazon Fire, since 57% of people deliver on purchasing a new streaming device. So what I like about this concept too is that it also delivers on our core promise. That not only helps CTV but our overall brand. What we learned is that this spot delivers also on the breaking news promise, and it's almost as good as being available 24/7, the 24/7 concept. We also got a lot of credit of sensibility for what the audience needs, and one that was very nice also was that we got credit for doing something that the other stations in Los Angeles were not. They also thought that the spot spoke about things that matter for the audience, and something along the lines of "this station gets me." One big takeaway from viewers that already had a perceived concept of our station is that they said that after seeing the spot, they are looking at ABC 7 in a new way. After all this, I guess we need to keep communicating to our audience in any way that we can, that we are delivering the news everywhere, and particularly keep pounding on the point of streaming. And that's it. Let's go to Bruce.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Of course, we know how important our streaming products are, so it's great to see everyone's approach to getting the word out. So now we're going to transition from marketing to digital and give you a few highlights from the Online News Association conference, which I'm happy to say I was a part of this year. And I can tell you, along with the great seminars and information, I think one of the best parts is being able to meet fellow news and digital managers face to face, and I hope we get the opportunity to do that again soon. So now we'll go to Rachel Schwartz with more from this year's conference. Rachel.
Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, it was a real joy to get to see everyone in person after a few years. And I'm really excited to say that we did have representation from all 8 stations, as well as some members of the division and ABC News. It's really nice to show up at conferences like these with a real show of unity between us and our network colleagues. We had some great time to network and collaborate internally. We also did some wonderful recruiting. We had the wonderful Michelle Rossoff from recruiting there with us for a couple of the days to talk about opportunities for prospective hires and interns. But this conference offers a real focus on innovation, both in content and product and workflow, with a real emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion as well. So, and additionally, I think it's really great that we go. ONA is historically a very print-focused conference. There's a lot of representation from print publishers. So it's nice to have us there with a real visible presence, which we had this year. Thank you to some wonderful signage from KABC. And I'll just dive into one of the things that I found most interesting was the idea of source tracking. Source tracking is something that really is something we see a lot of newsrooms starting to implement as a way to measure diversity and inclusion in their storytelling. So people are really starting to pay attention to who are we talking to when we are telling stories, both in terms of the characters that we approach, but also you can think about it from our experts that we talk to. Are we talking to the same experts again and again, and who are those people? So a little bit of a conversation around why do we track our sources. So really focusing it as a DEI measure, and then also really pushing these conversations to the forefront of our newsrooms and making sure that race and identity and diversity are a part of our conversation every single day as we are approaching news decisions in our news-making process. So one thing to think about would be the idea of a source audit versus source tracking. Audits are time-consuming and expensive. They're a ton of work. And at best, they're a snapshot in time, and they're usually retroactive. By the time you complete an audit, the information can be outdated. So one of the ideas about the benefit of tracking is that it's an ongoing assessment of what we are doing in real time that can be shared widely with anyone in the news team, whether it's news managers all the way down to the entire reporter body. Some ideas about how we could get this started if this is something that we wanted to do across OTV in our stations. First off would be to determine organizational goals and think about what questions we want to be asking when we think about our sources. Another idea was to create a script that's used by all reporters and producers when conducting interviews. The little snapshot here is actually an example of a script that we used in one of these source tracking sessions as we were trying to do this. So if we all think about it, when you're out in the field conducting an interview, you do have a little bit of a script that you use at the top of the interview. You probably ask the person to state and spell their name, to tell you their title, if it's an expert, something like that. So the idea is that we really want to build this, we want to make a habit out of the way that we ask for people's identifying information. And then also thinking about who's responsible for the tracking. Is this something that the reporters are going to be responsible for doing? Or is it something that the editors or the executive producers are going to be responsible for doing as these interviews are coming in? And then build a tracker. Maybe that last one is going to be the hardest one. We looked at a few different examples, everything from a Google Doc to more robust versions. Obviously, we want to make sure that whatever we did worked with our requirements and needs. But then I also just wanted to end by thinking about some of the questions that we could be asking. Again, this isn't about necessarily the person's specific identity. We don't need people's names attached to this identifying information. But if we're really thinking about looking at who we are talking about or who we are talking to from a diversity and inclusion basis, you may want to ask them about their personal identity, where they live down at the neighborhood level, not just the city level. Do they have experience speaking to media before? Do they understand how this works or what this is? What languages do they speak, and are they comfortable conducting an interview in English? If they identify with a specific income bracket, And I thought this was a really interesting question that someone brought up is, how long is your commute to work? Because that might reveal information about where they live, what type of transit they rely on, which could be indicators about their socioeconomic status. So I thought this was a really fantastic idea. There were actually multiple sessions about source tracking at the conference this year, so it's really top of mind for a lot of organizations right now. But with that, I'm actually going to kick it over to Ricky to talk about media law.
Hi, Rachel. Thank you. I know you're all probably rolling your eyes at me talking about law, so stay with me for just a minute here. I think that we all thought that the media law session was probably the most interesting 2 hours we spent at ODAC. We covered a ton of topics at that time. Copyright, fair use, the ethics and laws around embedding content on our digital stories, defamation, privacy law, and trespassing. And I think that on the next slide, I said that our biggest takeaway from this was that it's actually fun to listen to lawyers. Mark, can you hit the next slide? Thank you. So my recommendation, our recommendation for everybody in the OT session is that we should ask OT leaders to invite the Disney legal team that supports us here at ABC TV to hold a similar seminar for both our journalists and our newsroom leaders to cover some of the same topics, because I think that all of us have these questions, and frankly, many of us are too afraid to ask them. So on the next slide, I didn't want to do just a little quick overview without giving you something to take away from, and that was on privacy law. They introduced us to this Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press. They run a great website, rcf.org. All the journalists and news managers out there, write that down real quick. Post it to your monitor. They have tons of great legal resources. And the one that I thought was really fascinating was they have a 50-state catalog that goes over the rules for reporting both phone calls and in-person conversations. And the biggest takeaway is if you are calling out of state, you must follow the most restrictive law between those two states. And I thought that was just a quick good takeaway that everybody on this call could be practice today.
And I am going to talk about you too. I think we are all trying to figure out how I should introduce myself. I'm Hannah, the digital lead at KBC. And I think we're all trying to figure out how we can get millions of views on our YouTube videos. So here are one of the key takeaways. First is about the titles, so we can call the headline. Make sure that they are accurate. Sometimes we like to embellish when we sell the video, but we need to make sure that it's accurate to what's actually in the video. Keep it concise. The recommendation is under 70 characters. Then, of course, your SEO rules apply. Make sure your keywords are in the front of your headlines, and keep your headline engaging as always. For the description, the text that is underneath the video, you want to make sure that it's concise. Keep it short. You don't want to put the story in there. And then I thought this was a good note. You want to go back and update your description when there is an update to the story. In terms of the thumbnail, we talk a lot about thumbnails. Keep in mind that the play button is right in the center. And so, think about if it's blocking out something that would really sell the video. And then this next tip is a little tricky for us, but if you are able to make a custom thumbnail, put your logo either in the top right, top left, or the bottom left. Traditionally, you put the bottom on the bottom right, but that is going to be covered up. And then YouTube, a lot of the users are on their phone, and so keep in mind that people are looking at it on the smaller screen. Next slide, please. And then couple more takeaways. Make sure that you have a schedule just to be consistent. And of course, the outlier with this rule is breaking news. You want to make sure that when there is breaking news or you get video in where it's really compelling, you want to get that out ASAP inside the schedule. And then I just wanted to share a couple of changes that we made at KBC that have really helped us. And of course, we care a lot about YouTube because it factors into our comps for digital numbers. And so some of the changes we made is that we check YouTube for top performing content in our markets, similar to how we check people for Facebook and Instagram. We also have handy Slack reminders twice a day that kind of remind the team, hey, how are we ranking order the top videos? What this really does is help keep the top of mind for the team. And then, this is kind of a no-brainer, but if you see a video that's really our team, we make sure to prioritize getting it up for YouTube ASAP. Because what we have seen is that even beating another publisher by 5 minutes makes a huge difference in terms of how successful we are. With that, I'm going to pass it to Penny from the HDO.
Thank you very much, Hannah. So I'm going to be talking about trends in journalism. Last session, this was the 15th year of this, and something that people really look forward to every year. I'm just going to touch lightly on a few of the points that were made, including large language models. So technically speaking, this is a machine learning algorithm that can summarize or translate whatever large data set of text it just took in. And if your eyes glazed over at that, here's what this means in layman's terms. So you know all the sci-fi movies where the robots can mimic a human's thought process or speech? Well, this is kind of us moving towards that. The example that they used is GPT-3. So GPT-3 is believed to be one of the most significant models in the field of artificial intelligence. GPT-3 can compose music, it can pitch business ideas, and then it was even given a subset of SAT questions, and it scored 15% higher than any average university applicant. So something to point out, this session wasn't about practical applications. It really just surfaced trends and ideas meant to stimulate conversation. So some of the questions that I want you to think about after looking at this slide is, how can these tools help people like us in the journalism field reach new audiences, and what role will all of us play in an increasingly automated nation? So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. We're going to talk about the metaverse, which is something that we've all been talking about. If you really know what it means, if you don't, here's a big definition from Gartner. It is a persistent, immersive, and all-encompassing joining of our physical and digital lives, bringing together work, entertainment, marketplace, and social spaces in one seamless experience. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, where we're going to give you a couple of examples. So in Norway, their national holiday was canceled in 2020 due to COVID. So they held it in Minecraft, where 37,000 people turned up there to celebrate and march through the streets. And next, you don't normally think the famous Getty Art Museum and the game Animal Crossing, but this is that crossover. The Getty made nearly 8,000 works of art available so that gamers could use them as wallpaper or clothing, as you see in this photo, and put it on art canvases. So the question that we're thinking now is, how can we vote get into the metaverse and reach a new audience? So let's go to the next slide. The last thing that I want to leave you with is this thought. The way that we talk about the metaverse today echoes how we talk about the information superhighway and cyberspace in the 80s and 90s. So let's not get left behind, let's not stagnate, let us embrace the technology, and as Chad likes to say, let's evolve. Sarah, back to you.
Great, you guys. Thank you, Cindy, Rachel, Ruby, Hannah. A lot of important information there. And I saw Rachel shared in the chat that the OTU content verification session coming up on October 20th will include fair use and the fair conversation attorneys. So save the date for that one. That was really good information. Thank you all. And now let's do some storytelling. Justin Allen led a group of creators and producers researchers through 2.5 days of learning, collaborating, and experimenting at WLS in Chicago last week, and he's here to give the taste of what he was up to.
Thank you. Thank you. Hey, everybody. It was quite fun 2.5 days, really busy. The 40 storytellers were talking all over the representatives of the station. It was invigorating, interesting, energizing, and everything that you want to impact. One of the next slides, a little bit of an overview of what we talked about. Really spending the first day, divided in obviously 2.5 days, but the first day, all about the process and science of storytelling, which is kind of an odd way to think about it. Really trying to visualize how we think about long form, how we think about streaming, how we think about premium, whatever you want to call it, how we think about this automated process, automated science behind it, so that we are bringing through real these three different form art. We talked a lot about long form, particularly one of the things that we did was raising the idea of producing and telling stories active rather than block stuff, which I know is something that's new and something that as news and television created a hard thing to run down and say, well, we want to do that on 4 minutes, we want 6 that on 3 minutes or whatever, right? To produce those things as opposed to reprising everybody on something. Step back, look at your story as a whole, tell a full story, and then figure out the great presentation. Figure out how that works with the blocks. Once you have a really more structure. So we're going to talk about the series zone. Day 2 was all about advanced cinematography and lighting. That was a particularly fun day. I spent all the camera geeks in the room. It was really great. Another one for how scene building, how the looks. I took particular pleasure since I was on the spot, light and dress a room at WLS for an interview in front of everyone to talk us through the process. It was very fun to watch a lot of sweat coming down the forehead and still get the third day was spent with editing. We geared up to just offer for team editing, which is a truly a game changer when we talk about long form streaming community content across markets, across platforms, which allows us to really collaborate across the board. So it's great 2.5 days. Don't take my word for it because it's on it.
Hi everyone, and I just want to say out of the gate that I cannot, and I told Justin, cannot express just how much I enjoyed that workshop. And when I try to explain to people what it was that I liked so much about it, I landed on what I call the 3 Ps. It was super educational, it was really, really engaging, but most importantly, it was energizing. I think, a really challenging couple of years for probably most of us, if not all of us, maybe kind of overworked and under-resourced, and so that was exactly what I needed. And when we all know that long-form is a priority for the vision, it's the projects we want to work on, it feeds your soul. There can be this feeling that there's just not enough time or not enough resources, and I really walked away feeling like we were going to get the support from the division that we needed to tell these kind of stories that we want to tell. Now, when I say it was educational, I just want to explain that, because I mean that in a couple of different ways. I learned stuff, obviously, but oftentimes I think it was also about learning things that you already knew, but like maybe forgot about. So maybe there was a trick that I used to have in my toolkit that I used all the time and everything, maybe like that. You know, I'm using it too much. Maybe I should back off a little bit. And then you forget about it, and then you see somebody using it, and so you want to put it back in your toolkit. Or sometimes it's a trick that you do know, but you see somebody else use it, and it just is selected in different ways. So, for example, Justin mentioned sending us out into the field, and that was really fun. He teamed us up in teams of 2, and we were given this challenge where we have 1 hour, and we got to use some of the tips and tricks that we learned over the last couple of days, and just using the camera, natural sound, natural light, go out and in 25 to 45 seconds tell some kind of story. And then we all got to watch what everybody did. And one of the teams was Mike Amendola from KBC and Brian Shack from K2RK. And they had this kitchen coffee making sequence. And it was a triple net. So, you know, you had the very lid opening, and then the very cup going in, and then the coffee cup going into the base. And so I thought that was really nice, but then what really took the next level for me was that Mike drank the coffee, and then as he was walking out of the shot down the hallway, Brian used the natural sound of it, sort of like, and that was just something that like never occurred to me. Like, use natural sound a lot as rain shower, you know, you hear the whistle or the bell, and you see the vibrate, and you hear the horn, and you see the star, but to actually use it after the shot was something really different. I mean, it's such a tiny little thing, but I thought just that little moment.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you can't just throw away file.
In, as Justin said, there's 20 other people who also TV, and all really talented, really good stories.
And that also brought up, that's another note. I'm glad you brought that up. I don't know what they're playing, what format he's playing, waves or apes or whatever, but someone throw it in a meeting compression. Transcript that my bit rate sucked. I was telling them that I had a bunch of Apple stuff that is digitized for whatever reason. The SD card and Volkswagen would not play that version of it. Whereas we converted everything into WAV files. It plays codec. Yeah, AIF and WAV are both compressed. They're essentially
And my biggest takeaway from that was that not looking at
there is no codec.
but it's about in that time frame where you're finding the characters and going their world, and
it's just a different
flavor
of
put this wave on it there. It's not really how it works. There are ups and downs in life, or challenges, or obstacles that you have to overcome. And so you really should tell the story.
Waves, this isn't
on that journey. And so when you come to that with foundational storytelling, and stylizing techniques,
and I think that they've really sort of settled on those. Pretty much every software
when is left in your essence going? TIFF files that literally they figured out your tip files can be flipped. Okay, I just had this thing.
It takes a decade, but they finally my takeaways was more specific to me.
Well, and then it's ubiquitous.
And I was even after the pre-production part of it, being that I am a photographer and editor, seeing the way that Justin set up the curriculum, and it's a step-by-step, like foolproof way to make sure you got everything. You're doing the 3 acts, hitting all your beats and the proper story of, and staying on task throughout your project. Another big takeaway that I had was, you know, we talked about like development as far as what's doing well streaming, and you know what type of content is possibly something that would be, you know, be able to get greenlit at like types of projects that are doing well. And then also, being that it was in person now, meeting everybody was who I was impressed with everybody in the room. got to talk to people face to face, and like, keeping in mind a collaboration that you possibly do from somebody picking up off of a project they've done or working on a new project together, helping them out with a certain element that they could use from all the O&Ms. That's something that really, the in-person part of it really spoke to that. And then a third thing is just, it's super exciting to see where premium content is going with our company. One big thing is everybody's going to get to know it later on, but the virtual machine that's going to be coming up, it will be fantastic when it comes out, and it'll be able to streamline how everybody works. So keep a lookout for that. And then also just it shows us that our company is investing in us to go forward and build and be able to do these amazing premium content projects, and that our company is serious about this. We want to do this, we want to do it well. We have talented people across our whole company that can get this stuff done, and now we're setting up the frameworks to let that happen. So thank you guys.
Wendy, Brett, thank you. I found your takes on the workshop personally impact. Really, thank you. So, as Wendy mentioned, there was an assignment. It's not a workshop, but you give real work and you give people an assignment. You can't be a little creator and not put a challenge to them to go make something. So this, all of them were fantastic. All of them had, what do you say, something about them where you're like, oh, that's an interesting idea. That's an interesting take on it. But one stands out. It's very funny and it was they told a complete story using no words, essentially, no spoken words. And so this is from Andre Dorsey and Cisco Day, and of course that's why it's really good. Thank you to WLS, John, Larry, Avery, and Brad. To run around the studios,
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. And now we're going to turn to a different form of storytelling, TikTok. Jeremy from WABC and Steph from KBC are here to walk us through what's been working for their stations on this emerging platform. Take it away.
Everybody, so I'm Stephanie Lopez from KBC. I just celebrated my first year with the company yesterday, so I'm just really happy to have been part of the growth for TikTok for the station. And yes, I'll be talking about a couple of strategies that we have adopted to help us in our growth. So we get the help of an editor to make social videos for us. She's amazing, and she helps us for about an hour to an hour and a half, 45 days a week, depending on her schedule. We also switched from creating short social videos to vertical videos to fit the TikTok format, and obviously having both the help of an editor making the videos and repurposing those videos on all social platforms helps us with efficiency, opposed to making a specific video for each platform. We also get the help of our community journalists. A CJ is assigned on TikTok duty for a week, and then we rotate that lineup, and they are producing about 4 to 5 videos per shift. And if they need to be full-turn assignment, then they'll just resume to TikTok duty on their next available day. And having the help of the CJ is tremendous help. Obviously, it's an extra set of hands. We're all stretched thin already, and so it's convenient when we have breakers, because while we're working on an article or push or the social badge, we have somebody covering TikTok. And this also incorporates team members and familiarity on social with our talent. So I'll explain a little bit about what exactly this CJs use. They use a combination of a green screen filter, they do picture-in-picture, and or they will do a voiceover or over some video. We strive to keep the video short, 30 seconds to 45 seconds, to the point, it's news, we need to grab the viewer's attention quickly. And some stories do require more time. If there's, good nuggets, sounds, or great footage, then we don't really restrict them to a specific length. I personally have seen many videos that are over 3 minutes long, and they have millions of views. So we always encourage them to experiment and flag any ideas that they may have seen from other accounts, and use it for ours and see what hits. So now if I have on the right hand side, there's a couple of examples. We have 2 CJ videos, and then we can see our anchor veteran, Mark Brown, who we're also trying to get to join in on the fun. If we go on the next slide, we can see a couple of examples.
Merced County sheriffs say a family of 4 was kidnapped from a business in Central California.
We have a lowlife out there that kidnapped an 8-month-old baby, her mom, her dad, and her uncle. So far, we have no idea why the kidnapping. We have no motivation behind it. We just know that they are gone.
Merced County sheriffs have released a picture of the man they believe to be the suspect. He is considered armed and dangerous.
So that video was 26 seconds long, full of information, and it can play. And now we'll see Mark Brown's. It's completely different. This is a video. It's a 2-minute long video, and it's literally just Mark on his desk talking about the subject.
My favorite story of the day has to be this one. It is about a 20-year-old student at the University of Southern California. His name is Jake Freeman. He is a math and econ major who just made $110 million on one investment. One investment. He bought Bed Bath & Beyond. He bought a bunch of stock in Bed Bath & Beyond and ran it up to $110 million. So how did he do that? Well, a couple of things. The strategy I'm completely unfamiliar with, and I gotta confess, I was today years old when I found out about this, but it's meme stocks. And that is stocks that kind of become popular among social media folks who are maybe inexperienced investors, but it becomes popular because a lot of people hear about it on social media, and a bunch of people buy it. And they all decide to buy it and run the value up, and then later on get out of it. So that's what he did, this Jake Freeman. And so what he did was he borrowed $25 million from family and friends. It also helps when you have really wealthy family and friends who can loan you that kind of cheddar. So that's what he did. He borrowed that, bought a bunch of stock from Bed Bath & Beyond, and it ran up 400 and something percent to $110 million. And then he sold it. So he is now extremely wealthy. Probably was before this. He was able to get a hold of $25 million from his friends and his family, but he's even wealthier now. Being a math and economics major, I guess, didn't hurt either, so he probably knows what to do with it now. I went to USC. I wasn't a math or econ major. I was a journalism major, of course. And when I was 20 years old, I was working in a supermarket. I was paying my way through school and working in a supermarket, making about $12 an hour at the time, which was a lot of money back then. But yeah, so I didn't have the ability to put my hands on that kind of money. If it had been me and it was a meme stock, I would have put $250 down and I would have gotten, 1,000, which would have been cool. I would have accepted that. It would have been great. But congratulations to Jake Freeman, and as a fellow Trojan, I gotta say, fight on.
So these are two different examples. As you can see, one was short and to the point, and then Mark elaborated. He was able to connect to that story and explain what was going on very well. Lastly, I'll go over these three last tips. So we've also added TikTok to the SOP when handling breakers. If we have a CJ, then they can help us whip up a quick video. If not, we literally just post the VO or package that we ran. The lower third's already there, so our station bug is there. We just throw on the caption hashtags and we get it up as fast as we can. If there are no CJs, we also get the help of interns. Like I mentioned, we have an editor who's already making the videos, and so all we need their help with is adding the hashtags, captions. And something I forgot to mention, the CJs and interns do have to submit the TikToks, the prep TikToks for review prior to posting. And lastly, Molly, our manager of digital content strategy, had the great idea of whipping up a list of top videos from social, specifically from Facebook, evergreen videos that did very well in the previous months and weeks. And so if we don't have a CJ or we're low on content, we'll just rip those from the post and repurpose them for TikTok and post them. And as you can see the video on the right hand side, it was surveillance camera that captured a Fury jumping over a gate attacking some pups, and that was posted prior, and it got over 2 million views. So that's it for KBC, and I'll pass it on to Jeremy from WABC.
Well, thanks, Steph. Really great stuff. So I'm learning stuff myself from what you guys are doing. So thank you. Yeah. So first, I'm just going to go over a few